Grace had never been one to believe in signs or fate. Life, she had learned, was a quiet march of days, one after another, with the occasional memory sneaking in like an old song playing from a radio in the distance. But that morning, cool, golden, and still, something changed. She walked her usual route through the park, a place she often visited to clear her mind. The world was just waking up, squirrels darting through crunchy leaves, the distant bark of a dog chasing crows, joggers nodding politely as they passed. Everything felt normal. Until she heard it. A voice. Light, musical, and almost playful. "Gracie Goo." She stopped mid-step. Nobody had called her that in over a decade. The nickname belonged to a different lifetime. One filled with crayons, bedtime stories, and the warm embrace of her father. A name whispered only by two people, her dad, and her bird. Grace turned around slowly. The bench near the duck pond was empty. A couple of kids were tossing breadcrumbs. The path behind her was bare. She looked up. There, perched casually on the low branch of a maple tree, was a parrot. Bright green with streaks of blue along its wings, a flash of red on the chest, and eyes that shimmered with an unnerving familiarity. "Gracie Goo," it repeated, tilting its head. Grace stared. Her heart skipped a beat. It couldn't be. She stepped closer. The bird didn't fly away. It only blinked, once, twice, like it was studying her. "Tiko," she whispered. Her voice cracked. The parrot let out a low whistle, then laughed. A cackling sound that sent a chill down her spine. It was the exact laugh she remembered from so long ago. She hadn't heard it in 15 years, yet here it was. Raw. Real. Before she could get any closer, the bird flapped its wings and soared into the sky, disappearing into the trees like a dream waking from itself. Grace stood frozen. Her eyes were wide, her hands trembling slightly. She felt a strange mix of wonder and grief. Like seeing a ghost wearing the feathers of her childhood. Back at home, Grace paced the living room. Her tea went cold. Her phone buzzed, but she ignored it. "Tiko is gone," she said aloud, as if to remind herself. But the voice. That nickname. No one else knew it. No one. She dug through an old box from her attic. Dusty photo albums. A few tiny feathers wrapped in a paper towel. A cassette tape labeled "Tiko Sings Jazz with Dad." She popped it into an old tape recorder and sat cross-legged on the floor. Static, then the sound of her father chuckling, followed by the unmistakable squawk of Tiko singing a tune. "Fly Me to the Moon," broken and scratchy, but full of heart. "Gracie Goo," the bird called out mid-verse. She shut her eyes. A single tear rolled down her cheek. What if it was him? Could a parrot survive out there for 15 years? Could he find her again? The next morning, Grace returned to the park. She sat on the same bench near the tree and waited. Hours passed. She played Tiko's old jazz song from her phone, hoping the melody would draw him out. Nothing. On the third day, she brought a banana, Tiko's favorite treat, and placed slices on the bench beside her. Still nothing. But on the fourth day, just as she was about to give up, she heard a soft rustle above her. She looked up. There he was. Same spot. Same eyes. "Gracie Goo," he said gently. Grace felt her chest tighten. She didn't move. Didn't even blink. The parrot hopped down a branch, then another, until he was just above her head. She slowly lifted her phone and played the recording again. The parrot swayed side to side, clearly recognizing the tune. "Tiko," she whispered, "is it really you?" The parrot blinked once, and then let out a low, warm whistle. The exact one he used to mimic her dad's coffee kettle. She smiled through tears. "It's you." But just like before, as soon as she reached into her bag, the bird took off again, disappearing into the trees. Later that day, she walked to the park's maintenance shed and found an old groundskeeper sitting on a crate, sipping tea. "Excuse me," she said, "have you seen a parrot around here?" The man looked up. "You mean that green fellow? Comes and goes. Seen him for years now. Sits on that big maple near the pond. Calls people strange names sometimes. Has he always been here?" The old man shrugged. "At least 5 or 6 years. Maybe more. No one knows where he came from. But he's smart. Real smart. Not afraid of people, but he don't let anyone get too close. Got a name he shouts sometimes. Gracie or something." Grace covered her mouth with her hand. "Gracie Goo?" He snapped his fingers. "That's the one. You know him?" She nodded slowly, heart thudding in her chest. "I think I might." That night, she couldn't sleep. Images of her father teaching the bird to say her name, of Tiko dancing to old jazz tunes, of the stormy night when the window was left open. She remembered searching the neighborhood with a flashlight, calling his name in tears. He'd never come back. Until now. Grace returned to the park again the next morning, this time with a folding chair, a banana, and an old recording of herself reading Goodnight Moon, one of the books she used to read aloud while Tiko sat on her shoulder. Hours passed. The sun arched high. Finally, she heard it. "Gracie Goo," the bird called from the branch. This time, he didn't flee. He hopped down. First to the back of the bench. Then to the armrest. Finally, onto the edge of her chair. Grace stayed still. Not a muscle moved. Then, ever so gently, Tiko stepped onto her knee. Their eyes met. And in that moment, it didn't matter how many years had passed, how many miles he'd flown, or how many homes he'd survived. What mattered was that somehow, against all odds, he had found her again. Grace whispered, "Welcome home." And for the first time in 15 years, the parrot tucked his head beneath his wing. And fell asleep in her lap. Grace didn't move for a long time. Tiko. Her Tiko. Slept quietly on her lap, his little chest rising and falling, his feathers warm and soft against her jeans. She ran a trembling hand over his back, remembering exactly how he used to like it. Light strokes, never too firm. His eyes fluttered gently, and a tiny chirp escaped him in his sleep. The wind rustled through the park trees, carrying with it 1,000 memories. She had waited 15 years for this moment. Or maybe he had. That night, Grace didn't want to leave him behind. She knew he might fly off again, and the thought of losing him twice was unbearable. She called a friend at the local animal rescue and arranged a small cage. Just in case. But when she gently opened her car door and held out her hand, Tiko simply flew to her shoulder like he'd never left. At home, Grace placed a cozy towel-lined basket near the window and set out slices of banana and almonds. Tiko inspected it all carefully, then let out a sharp whistle of approval. She laughed through a tear. "Still picky, huh?" Tiko didn't respond with words. Instead, he waddled over to the edge of the table, tapped it twice with his beak. A trick he used to do when he was happy. And then sang the first few notes of "You Are My Sunshine." Grace sat down slowly. Oh my God, you remember that? It had been her lullaby, and his favorite mimic song. Her dad used to sing it to both of them, first to Grace as a child, then to the bird who learned it note for note. "You make me happy, when skies are gray," she sang softly, her voice cracking. Tiko let out a long whistle, harmonizing just like he used to. They finished the song together. Later that evening, Grace opened her old photo album. She found the picture. The one of her dad sitting with Tiko perched on his bald head, both of them looking smug. Another photo showed her at age 9, with wild curly hair and paint-smeared jeans, feeding Tiko a banana with a plastic spoon. "Where have you been all these years?" she asked quietly. Tiko tilted his head. Then, as if he understood the question, he gave a short chirp, jumped onto her arm, and stared into her eyes. That night, he slept on the curtain rod. His old favorite perch. And didn't stir once. Grace watched him with a warm ache in her heart. Maybe she hadn't been the only one who never forgot. The next morning, she called her younger brother, Sam. They hadn't spoken much in recent years, but this felt like something worth sharing. "You're not going to believe this," she said. "You found Dad's watch?" "No," she said, laughing. "I found Tiko." There was a long silence. Then, a chuckle. "The parrot?" "Grace, come on. I'm serious. He came to me in the park. He still calls me Gracie Goo. Still sings our songs." He remembered. She expected disbelief. Instead, Sam went quiet. "He really came back?" "Yes." 15 years? Sam's voice dropped. I thought he'd died." "So did I." They talked for an hour. About Dad, about childhood, about things they hadn't said in a long time. Tiko sat on the back of her chair the entire time, occasionally squawking into the phone. "Sounds like him," Sam said. "Sassy little guy." Over the next few days, Grace slowly reintroduced Tiko to his old world. She played their jazz cassette in the mornings. She repainted the wooden perch she'd stored in the attic. She even found his old mirror toy and hung it by the window. Tiko seemed at home. But he also seemed changed. He watched everything. The trees. The sky. The sound of wind chimes. Sometimes, he would get quiet and distant, staring into space, as if remembering something. Or someone. One afternoon, Grace walked into the room and found him staring at a photo of her father on the bookshelf. His feathers were slightly ruffled, his eyes wide. "Do you remember him, Tiko?" The parrot turned his head toward her. Then, in the softest voice she'd ever heard from him, he whispered, "Good boy, Tiko." Her father's exact words. Grace broke down in tears. But as the days passed, something else began to unfold. Each night at 6 p.m., Tiko would grow restless. He'd flap around the house, fly to the windows, and call out strange names. None of which Grace recognized. Jojo. Samir. Rue? She took note of the names and recorded the calls. What had Tiko been through all these years? Grace reached out to a local avian rescue network and uploaded a picture of Tiko along with a short story, found a green parrot who says old names. Possibly lost years ago. Seeking past owners. To her surprise, emails came flooding in. One woman claimed the bird had landed on her apartment balcony years ago and stayed for 2 months. A retired teacher said a similar parrot had visited her classroom every morning for a year and vanished each winter. Another man said, "He showed up after my wife died, sat on our fence every day. I always thought he was sent by her." Grace was stunned. Each story painted a picture of Tiko's mysterious, wandering journey. A parrot who moved from soul to soul, bringing small comforts and ghost-like memories. But he had never stayed. Until now. Had he been searching all this time? That night, Grace lit a candle beside her father's picture. "Tiko found his way back," she said aloud. The parrot sat beside her, his feathers puffed with comfort. She smiled. "Maybe you sent him." Tiko leaned in and rubbed his head gently against her cheek. She didn't need any more proof. He was home. The days had become quieter. Not empty, but full of little echoes. Tiko no longer paced by the window. He still watched the outside world, but now, he watched it as though he had made peace with it. His wings folded loosely. His eyes blinked slowly in the morning sun. Grace often caught him humming softly to himself. Snippets of songs, old words, even laughter that didn't belong to her. She kept a notebook now. Every name he said, every strange sound or unfamiliar phrase, she jotted down with the date and time. There was something sacred about it, like collecting feathers from dreams. Jojo, Samir, Rue. These 3 names came most often. But one morning, as Grace was buttering toast and humming under her breath, Tiko said something new. "Run, baby, run." She turned sharply. "What did you say?" Tiko blinked at her, then repeated it with perfect clarity. "Run, baby, run. Fire." Grace's hands froze midair. That tone. The urgency in it. It wasn't a song lyric. It was a memory. She slowly sat down and looked at him. "Tiko, where did you hear that?" The parrot stared at her, then looked away, almost shyly, before climbing up to his perch and fluffing his feathers. That phrase haunted her all day. That evening, Grace decided to visit the animal rescue center in town. She brought Tiko in a soft carrier. He wasn't thrilled, but he tolerated it with only a few sarcastic squawks. "Any chance someone's reported a talking parrot over the last decade or so?" she asked at the front desk. The woman smiled kindly. "You'd be surprised. People lose parrots all the time. They're escape artists." She led Grace to an old database. "We've kept incident reports since 2000. What's your bird's band number?" Grace blinked. "He has a band?" "Yes. Most domesticated parrots are banded. Tiny metal ring on the leg." At home, she checked. Sure enough, on Tycho's left leg was a small, dull band. She returned the next day and handed it over. After some digging, the woman looked up, surprised. This bird was originally registered to a woman named Amina Delgado. Purchased in 2005 in Florida. Grace's heart skipped. Florida? That's what it says. But the band wasn't registered past 2008. "Do you think he flew from Florida?" The woman chuckled. "That'd be a stretch. But parrots can travel, especially if they get passed around or escape and survive in the wild." "And your Tiko?" "He's a survivor." Grace went home and researched Amina Delgado. She found a few old addresses. A woman by that name had lived in Orlando. Another had perished in a house fire in 2008. That word rang in her ears. Fire. "Run, baby, run." She sat on the couch, staring at Tiko. "Did you live with her?" Tiko whistled once. Then, in a quiet, mournful voice, he repeated a name Grace hadn't heard before. "Lucy." That night, Grace couldn't sleep. She scoured message boards, social media, and local Florida news archives. Then she found a story from 2008. House fire claims life of single mother Amina Delgado, young daughter escapes. Pet parrot missing. The girl's name was Lucy Delgado. Age, 7. Grace felt her chest tighten. Could it be? She contacted a journalist who had written the original piece and asked if they had any follow-up information. The woman replied the next day. "Lucy went into foster care. Last I heard, she was adopted by a family in South Carolina. She would be about 24 now." Grace wrote back immediately. "I have her parrot. He survived. His name is Tiko." There was a pause of hours. Then a phone call came. A soft voice came through the receiver. "Hello, is this Grace?" "Yes." "Is this Lucy?" A long breath. "You found him?" "I think I did. He came to me in the park. Started saying things. Your name. Your mom's name. Run, baby, run. I found the fire report. I'm so sorry." The line went quiet. Grace could hear soft breathing. "I used to hold him when I was scared," Lucy whispered. "He talked me through nightmares. And, that night, he screamed before I heard anything. He saved me. Grace felt her throat tighten. I thought he died in the fire. I never knew. He's here. He's alive. And he remembers you. Lucy began to cry. So do I. A week later, they met halfway in a quiet cafe near a forested lake in North Carolina. When Lucy walked in, now a woman with kind eyes and nervous hands, Tiko was perched on Grace's shoulder, alert. He froze the moment he saw her. Then, a sound that shook the room. "Luluusi," he screeched. Lucy dropped her bag and rushed forward, tears streaming down her face. "Tiko!" He leapt into her arms, flapping wildly, and then nestled against her neck, chirping and crooning like a lullaby. Grace watched, eyes wide, heart full, as the bird whispered, "Good girl, good girl. Mama's here." That evening, they sat by the lake, sharing stories. "He disappeared after the fire," Lucy said, stroking his feathers. "I searched every day. My foster mom said he probably flew away and found peace. I never believed it." Grace smiled. "He's been with people. He's helped others, I think." "He's an angel," Lucy whispered. "With wings." They sat in silence. Then Lucy turned to Grace. "What are you going to do now?" Grace smiled faintly. "He came back to me for a reason. Maybe to bring me to you. Maybe we both needed closure." Lucy nodded. "Do you think he'd want to stay with me?" Grace hesitated. Tiko looked up at them both. He flew back to Grace's shoulder, then over to Lucy's lap. Then back again. Finally, he rested in between, on the table. "He still loves both of us," Grace said. "Maybe, he's not done yet," Lucy added. The next morning, Grace and Lucy walked together beneath a sky veiled in soft clouds, the scent of pine hanging in the air. Tiko rode calmly on Lucy's shoulder now, his feathers occasionally ruffling in the breeze, his eyes alert and scanning. As if remembering the wind, the trees, and something long buried beneath memory. They stopped at a small picnic bench near the lake. Grace set down her thermos of coffee and looked at Lucy. "Do you ever wonder how he survived?" she asked. Lucy exhaled. "Every minute." They watched Tiko stretch his wings wide before settling down again, eyes half closed. He looked content. Almost wise. Grace reached into her bag and pulled out a bundle of printed pages. "I started digging. After I found his band number and your name. I went deeper. I traced every story I could find that mentioned a parrot like him." Lucy leaned closer, curious. One family in Alabama reported a talking parrot appearing in their backyard around 2010. The bird screamed fire-related phrases and cried at night. They fed him, but he flew off before they could catch him. Lucy's lips parted. He was still scared. Grace nodded. Then 2 years later, a woman in Georgia wrote on a pet forum about a green parrot who stayed on her porch for 2 weeks. He mimicked lullabies and called out Lucy every morning at sunrise. Her toddler sang with him. Then one day, he was gone. Tears gathered in Lucy's eyes. "He was looking for me." Grace continued gently. "There's more." A church pastor in South Carolina claimed a parrot landed on his pulpit during an outdoor service. The bird kept repeating, "Mama loves you." Some thought it was divine. He stayed for a day. Then vanished. Tiko stirred. "Mama loves you," he whispered faintly. Lucy clutched her chest. Grace laid a hand on hers. "It's like he was drawn to people who needed hope. Like he had a mission." Later that afternoon, they took Tiko to a nearby vet, one who specialized in birds. Grace wanted a checkup. Lucy wanted confirmation. Maybe even answers. The vet, a gentle older man with bright eyes and steady hands, examined Tiko thoroughly. He's remarkably healthy for his age, he said, but he carries trauma. You can see it in the way he flinches at certain sounds. Smells. Like smoke? Grace asked. He nodded. And alarms. Sharp beeps. Flashing lights. Lucy's eyes dropped. He remembers. Parrots have extraordinary memories, the vet said. But it's not just memory. It's emotion. Bonds. Some parrots die of grief. Others carry their loss like a song they can't stop singing. He looked at them both. This one. He waited. He held on. For you. Lucy reached into the carrier and gently picked him up. I never stopped loving him. The vet smiled. And he never stopped loving you. That night, the three of them stayed in a small lakeside cabin. Grace had rented it so they could have one quiet night. Just the three souls whose paths had been stitched together by fire, time, and feathers. The sky outside turned lavender, then deep navy, scattered with stars. Inside, Lucy lay on the couch with Tiko resting on her chest. His soft breathing rose and fell with hers. Grace sat by the fireplace, watching the flames. Did you ever feel like something was missing? Lucy asked softly, but you couldn't name it? Grace nodded. Every day. Until he found me. Me too. Silence lingered. Not awkward. But thick with meaning. Then, Lucy said something neither had expected. Would you come with me? To Florida? Grace blinked. Florida? I want to visit the house. The one that burned. I haven't been back since I was 7. Grace hesitated. Are you sure? Lucy looked down at Tiko. I think it's time he goes home. 3 days later, they stood in front of a fenced lot in a quiet Orlando suburb. Overgrown grass. A private property sign. The house itself had been bulldozed years ago, but a stone chimney still stood crooked in the back, blackened by soot. Tiko was silent in his travel cage, wide-eyed. I lived there, Lucy whispered. My mom loved roses. She planted them along the front. Grace bent down. Among the weeds, tiny shoots of wild roses poked through. She's still here, Grace said softly. Lucy opened the cage. Tiko hopped out and perched on her shoulder. He looked around. Then slowly, mournfully, he began to sing. A low, warbling melody. Grace had never heard it before. But Lucy froze. That was our bedtime song. He sang it all the way to the chimney ruins. Then he said, gently, run, baby, run. Lucy broke down. She sank to her knees on the earth, her body shaking. Grace knelt beside her, wrapping her arms around both her and the bird who had carried this pain across 15 years and 1,000 miles. You saved me, she sobbed. You never forgot. Tiko whispered, good girl. Lucy safe. And then, the strangest thing happened. A wind swept through the lot, stirring the rose bushes, making the soot in the air dance. And for a moment, it felt like they weren't alone. Later, they sat in the car parked under a jacaranda tree. Lucy looked at Grace. You know, maybe he didn't just survive. Maybe he was guided. From person to person. Until he found someone kind enough to listen. Grace smiled. You think I was a stepping stone? I think you were his lighthouse. They looked back at the ruins of a house and the ghost of a fire long gone. Then Grace turned to Lucy. What will you do now? Lucy stroked Tiko's head. I'll take him home. But only if he wants to come. Tiko looked between them. He gave a low chirp, then gently flew into Lucy's lap. Looks like he's made his choice, Grace whispered. But he's part of you too, Lucy said. I want you in his life. In ours. As the sun set behind the Florida palms, painting the sky with golden fire, the three of them sat still, connected not by blood, but by memory, by love, and by a small green parrot who carried stories in his feathers. Tiko whistled softly, a tune no one could name. And both women, in perfect unspoken harmony, smiled through their tears. Back in New York, Lucy's apartment felt different. Warmer. Lived in. Not because she'd redecorated, but because Tiko was there. Singing softly in the mornings, perching on the windowsill during the golden hours, watching the world go by like an old soul with memories too heavy for one life. She had cleared a space near her bookshelves for his spacious new cage. But he rarely stayed in it. Most nights, he slept on her shoulder while she read. Grace still visited twice a week. Sometimes for tea. Sometimes just to sit in the quiet and listen to Tiko's strange blend of lullabies, fire alarms, and whispered phrases like "Lucy's safe" and "Mama loves you." But this night was different. Tiko had been restless all day. He hopped nervously along the back of the couch, wings twitching, eyes darting toward the windows as if expecting someone. He refused his favorite dried mango, and when Lucy tried to stroke him, he let out a sharp squawk and flew up to the bookshelf. Lucy frowned. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" He didn't answer. Just turned to the corner, watching a shadow that wasn't there. Grace arrived a little later. Lucy opened the door, whispering, "He's acting strange." They sat together, watching Tiko pace on the top shelf like a sentry on guard. Then he began to speak. Rapidly, without pause. It was a string of broken sentences from his past. "Lucy, run, fire, fire." "No." "Mama, wait." Lucy, cry. "Window." "Safe now." "Good girl." "Stay down." "SHHH." Both women stared, breath caught in their throats. It was like a recording. A living memory finally playing its full length. Tiko turned to them slowly and added, "Mama say, I love you always." Then he was silent. Tears welled in Lucy's eyes. He saw it all. Every second. From the fire, to the rescue, to losing me. Grace whispered, "He's never told that part before." Lucy's hands trembled. "He carried that pain, so I wouldn't have to." She stepped closer to him. Tiko lowered his head. "Thank you," she said through tears. "For remembering. For saving me." Tiko let out a soft whistle and nestled against her hand. Later that week, Grace arranged something special. "I have a friend," she told Lucy, "a sound engineer. He works on nature documentaries. He's fascinated by animal communication. I told him about Tiko. He wants to record him. Maybe even help decipher patterns in his speech." Lucy agreed. They met at a small studio in the city. Tiko was calm that day, unusually so. As if he sensed something bigger was happening. The room was quiet except for the faint hum of equipment. The engineer pressed record. For the first few minutes, Tiko said nothing. Then, without prompt, he started humming the lullaby again. The one Lucy's mother used to sing. Then, as clearly as if it were rehearsed, he said, "Lucy was brave. Mama gone. Lucy safe. Lucy loved." The room went still. No one moved. No one breathed. Then he added, softly, "I waited. I waited. I waited." The engineer stopped the tape, visibly shaken. He knows. He remembers. Not just words. Context, feelings. Lucy touched her heart. "He was my witness. My guardian." Grace whispered, "Your echo." They left the studio in silence. That night, Lucy uploaded a short clip to a small blog she'd started. Feathers and Memory. Just 1 minute of Tiko singing and saying, "Lucy safe. I waited." She didn't expect much. But by morning, the video had 2.4 million views. The internet exploded. The bird who waited 15 years became a trending phrase across platforms. Comments poured in from all over the world. I cried. I've never heard anything so beautiful. This proves animals never forget. Tiko deserves his own movie. This parrot remembers more than we do. A major news outlet reached out. Then a documentary producer. Then a podcast. Lucy turned them all down at first. Until she realized something. Tiko's story wasn't just about grief. It was about hope. About the threads that tie us to the ones we love, even across years, loss, and fire. She said yes to a single interview. With Grace beside her, and Tiko resting quietly on her arm. The interviewer asked one final question. What do you want the world to learn from Tiko? Lucy looked down at him, then into the camera. That love, real love, doesn't forget. It waits. And sometimes, it flies home. That night, they sat on the balcony, watching the stars. Tiko gently repeated, "Fly home, love waits." Grace leaned her head against Lucy's shoulder. Lucy whispered, "I think he came back not just to find me, but to teach me." Grace smiled. And to teach all of us. Tiko chirped once, then began to sing. The lullaby drifted into the dark sky, carried on a breeze that remembered everything. A year passed. The seasons turned gently in New York, and so did Lucy's heart. She had begun painting again. Watercolors at first, then oils. Her small studio filled with images of wings, warm eyes, and golden skies. Every canvas seemed to whisper a piece of Tiko's story. Her trauma had become her palette. Her pain, a brushstroke of memory. And the quiet hope that had flown back into her life. Tiko remained by her side. But time, as always, had its own way. Tiko was aging. He wasn't as quick to hop across the window rail, or mimic the microwave beep with perfect pitch. He still spoke, still hummed the lullaby, still said Lucy safe when she was near. But his feathers had lost a little of their shine, and he often sat quietly for hours. Eyes half closed, body still. Lucy knew. She had seen it in his posture. In the silence between words. A quiet preparing. One morning, she woke up to find him unusually still in his cage. Not in pain, not distressed. Just calm. She opened the door and he stepped out slowly, climbed up her arm, and rested gently against her neck. He hadn't done that since he was young. She sat with him by the window, watching the city stir awake beneath the morning haze. He looked at her once, deeply. Then he whispered, "Lucy, safe." And he closed his eyes. Lucy didn't cry. Not at first. She sat for hours, holding him, rocking gently, her fingers tracing the curve of his tiny head. Grace came later. One look at Lucy's face, and she knew. They buried Tiko under a flowering dogwood tree in the park. The same place they first found him, where he had first said her name again after 15 years. Lucy painted a small wooden marker. Tiko. The bird who waited. A soul with wings, a heart that remembered. People came. Strangers who had seen the video. Children who whispered his name. Old couples who carried seeds in their pockets just to feed the birds and say thank you. The spot became a quiet memorial. Not just to a parrot, but to memory, to waiting, to a kind of love the world didn't know it needed until Tiko taught it. One evening, months later, Lucy stood in front of a packed audience at a storytelling event. Her blog had become a book. Her art, a gallery tour. But tonight wasn't about that. She stood under soft lights and spoke of fire, and feathers, and loss, and waiting. She told them about a bird who flew through smoke and memory, carrying her name like a prayer for 15 years. She ended with a whisper. He remembered me when I couldn't remember myself. He held my name when the world thought I was gone. He came home, not to live, but to remind me how. Silence filled the room. Then, applause. Soft at first, then rising like a wave. But Lucy didn't smile for the praise. She looked upward. At the rafters. At the invisible sky above them. And quietly mouthed, "Thank you, Tiko." Back home that night, she left the cage open. Not because she was waiting, but because she knew. Somewhere, in some way. He had never really left. And when the wind rustled through the open window, it carried a faint echo. A voice only she could hear. Lucy, safe. If this story moved your heart, please like, share, and subscribe to the Furry PAWS Tales. Tell us in the comments, have you ever been remembered by an animal in a way that surprised you? Turn on notifications for more unforgettable stories of love, loyalty, and second chances.